How's everybody? You guys are here in the rain. I can't believe it. And you have terrible hair. Who cares? Anyway, I just want to say thank you for hanging in there during this rainy Saturday. I'm so happy to be here with you. And I'm happy to tell you about this book that my friend and I, Jane, have written. And I've wanted to be a journalist for as long as I can remember. And this book is all about tracking people down, interviewing fascinating people. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how I became a journalist. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book. So when I graduated from college, I knew one thing. I knew I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. So I said to my mom, who's sitting here in the audience today, I said, Mom, can I borrow your car? Because I have one job interview lined up in Richmond, Virginia. My mom lives in Alexandria. And I had a new green suit on. I had my hair all blown out. I had a resume tape. And my mom said, you know, you can do it. You can do it. I drove to Richmond for my job interview at this TV station. I looked around the newsroom and I'm like, this is good. I'm going to sit there and I am going to date him and my whole life is going to snap into focus. The news director puts the tape in the machine. He plays it for a couple of minutes. He stops it. He pops it out and he says, Hoda, I'm sorry, you're not ready for Richmond. And I had no plan B, like that was it. And I go, what, was there something wrong with the tape? He said, no, you're not very good, but I want to wish you good luck, you know. Bye-bye, like that. So as I'm leaving, he says, well, wait, before you go, there's a buddy of mine who's a news director in Roanoke, and he's hiring people. He's leaving for a conference tomorrow morning, but I bet you if you catch him tonight, he'll give you a job. He said, you know, do you want me to call him and tell him that you're coming? I said, please call him and tell him I'm coming. So I called my mom and I said, my mom goes, how was Richmond? I go, Mom, I don't want Richmond. I want Roanoke. I'm going to Roanoke. I get to Roanoke. I drive 4 hours. I look around. I'm like, this is okay. I can sit there and, oh, I can date him. Like, this is good. I'll be fine in Roanoke. The news director in Roanoke put my tape in the machine. He played it for a couple of minutes. He popped it out. And he said, Hoda, I'm sorry, you're not ready for Roanoke. I'm like, who in the hell's not ready for Roanoke? You know what I mean? Apparently me. I was like, okay. I said, is there something wrong? He said, you're not very good. You're green. You know, he said, you know, bye-bye, like that. So as I was leaving, he said, well, wait a second, before you go. He said, a buddy of mine is hiring in Memphis, Tennessee. He's going to the same conference I'm going to, but he's leaving in the morning. If I call him, you know, I'll let him know you're coming if you'd like. And I said, please call him and tell him I'm coming. So I called my mom, how was Roanoke? I go, Mom, I don't want Roanoke. I want Memphis. Like, I am going to Memphis. Now, Tennessee's the long, skinny state, and Memphis is all the way at the other end. So I drove all night across the great state of Tennessee. I got to Memphis. I meet the news director. I hand him my tape. He puts in the machine. He plays it. He ejects it. And he says, Hoda, I'm sorry, you are not ready for Memphis. And I thought, oh my God, what is wrong with me? The suit, the hair, the tape is terrible. And as I'm leaving, he said, well, wait, before you go, he says, I have a buddy of mine who's hiring. I drove the entire southeastern United States. I got rejected in Birmingham, Alabama at ABC, NBC, and CBS, 3 there. I drove to Dothan. Does anyone know where Dothan is? Okay, then. I got rejected in map.dothan. The guy said, no, thank you. I got rejected through the panhandle. At the end, 27 news directors told me no. 27. And I was done. I was tapped out. It was 10 days later. I was depressed. My mom needed the car. It was time to go home. So I said, you know what? I was in the panhandle. I said, I'm just going to drive home to Virginia. And I'm not, you know, I was sad. I put on James Taylor. I didn't have a map. I figured I was going to drive north for a while and then over to Virginia. So you know how they say God gives you a sign? So there was this huge physical sign that said Greenville, Mississippi, which shows you where I was. Our eye is on you, CBS. I said, you know what? I'm going to go into that television station and get a map. I am so lost. And then I'm just going to go home and it'll be over. So I get to the station, and there's this short little man named Stan. He's like, hey, I'm Stan Sandroni. I'm the news director. I was like, hi. He goes, I was sports director yesterday, and I got promoted. I was like, oh, good for you. He said, well, what is your name? I said, my name's Hoda. He said, come on in, Hilda. Let's look at that tape. I was like, you know what? Who cares what your name is when you're getting rejected? I didn't even care. So he takes the tape. He puts it in the machine. He plays it. And something amazing happened. He watched that tape. He watched the whole horrible, terrible 30-minute tape to the end. I was suddenly standing up taller. I was watching him watch it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. When it was done, he stopped the tape, he looked at me, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, Hilda, I like what I see. I said, you do? I was just sobbing because I was so tired, and I couldn't believe this guy hired me. So it reminded me that you just need one person to believe in you. You don't need 27, you need one. So if you love something enough, find the one person who's going to allow you to go down that road. And to show you how much this guy believed in me, I was in the newsroom one day working on a story, something breaking like how Girl Scouts needed more leaders or whatever it was. And as I was writing the story, he walks in and he goes, who has a blazer? I go, what? He goes, a jacket. Who has a jacket? I go, oh, I have a blazer. It's hanging up on that hanger. I thought somebody needed it for a stand-up. He goes, oh, good. You need to anchor the news because Ann is sick. I was like, okay, so the litmus test for who anchors the news in Greenville is who shows up to work with a blazer. I was like, always show up to work with a blazer. That's what I told myself. So that day, I'd never done it before. I was like, come on, this is like a big day for me. I put me in the blazer, we're sitting in the studio, and it was a single anchor show. I was all by myself. I was praying, I was like, please God, come on, I need to do this, this is a big deal. And the teleprompter was really big, and the woman who was ill was Ann Martin, who was like the main big popular anchor in Greenville. So the prompter said, good evening, I'm Hoda Kotb, Ann Martin is out sick. I'm like, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. So I looked up at the prompter and I said, good evening, I'm Ann Martin. I was like, oh my God. Have you ever done that? You're like, they know I'm not Ann Martin. They love Ann Martin. I'm like the other one. And I wanted to start all over. You know when you just want to, but I had already blurted that out. And I don't know about you, but when I mess up, I keep on messing up. And it was one of those newscasts that I just kept fumbling and stumbling. It was like I was on a toboggan going down a mountain screaming. That's what it felt like in my head. 30 minutes was over, and it was long, and when it was done, the guy on the floor who tells you when to start talking goes like this, ooh, good try. Let me get that mic off you, and he like sort of shook off the cooties, and I walked into the newsroom to get canned, and I looked around for Stan, and he wasn't there, and I thought, oh my God, I have to wait till tomorrow to get fired. And I got in the car and I was depressed, so I said, let me go to the grocery store, because everyone has their thing. And mine is, I like to have junk food or ice cream or something. So I said, you know, I'm going to go get something to eat. I feel terrible. So I get to the grocery store and I'm looking around at the ice cream aisle. And this lady comes up to me and she looked crazy. You know, her hair was nuts, just a few teeth. And she goes, oh my God, I just seen you on TV. I felt so sorry for you. I was like, oh God, oh my God, oh my God. So I thought it was over, and so I went back to work the next day to get fired, and Stan was like, well, I've seen what happened. It wasn't good, but Ann's sick again, so why don't you try it? He gave me another go. And this guy, they asked us to bring to Studio 1A in Rockefeller Center somebody who changed the course of your life. And I brought Stan Sandroni, and he walked in there. You guys, it was such a big day for me to have him there. He looked around and he was like, is that Matt Lauer? Is that Al Roker? Hey, Al! You know, but he said, I knew that you could do it. And I said, you know what? You are the only one. And again, remember in your life, if you love something enough, just, you know, a lot of people are going to tell you no along the way. And sometimes you just need one person who tells you yes. And I think part of what we were doing, thank you, part of what we were doing when we wrote this book, too, is you realize sometimes you really have to pull things out from your heart, and sometimes you reach a fork in the road. And this book that my co-writer and I, Jane Lorenzini, wrote is called 10 Years Later. And I don't know if you've ever been in a funk, and I know we all have at some point in our lives, and you wonder, like, how am I going to make it 10 minutes? Let alone 10 days, let alone 10 years. And you sort of wish you could fast forward through life and see what happens at the other end. Well, we thought it would be a cool concept to find 6 incredibly fascinating people who went through a moment in life and see what happened after 10 years. And one of the things we learned is that it's hard to get through something difficult for yourself. It's much easier when you do it for your children, for your spouse, for God, for someone bigger than you. And I remember a long, long time ago, I was running the Boston Marathon in a very misguided thing, and I was way in the back, you know, and everyone in the back, I was with, like, I was probably in the 5, 6 hour, 7 hour, you know what I mean, back of the bus. And as I'm going, the last stretch, the last half a mile, everybody runs. No matter how tired you are, at the end of 26 miles, people are running. One guy had a t-shirt that said, this is for my friends at Vietnam, and he was running. Another woman had something that said, this is for, looked like her child who had passed away, and she was running. Another guy was running for his mom. You could see the dates. And there was one woman walking at the end, and on her shirt it said, this one's for me. It's hard to do something for yourself, and what we found in this book are all these people who overcame obstacles did it for someone else. There's a woman in our book named Amy Barnes who weighed 500 pounds, and she was in a very abusive relationship. She sort of thought that was all she deserved, you know, and this guy was terrible to her, and she had a couple of kids, and she just felt trapped. And sometimes you're in a terrible situation, but you think to yourself, maybe what I have here is better than what's out there. And that's what she thought. And at one point, her significant other beat her so badly that she was bloodied laying on the floor of the bathroom, and her young son walked in and wiped her face. She had blood on her, and he said, Mommy, I want you to be pretty again. And she had ultimately this incredible epiphany that I hope you guys will read about, but she changed everything because she looked at her kids and thought, I'm not going to live this way anymore. If you look at her before and after photos, she looks like a different person. She weighed 500 pounds. Now she does this, she has like a beautiful body. She does bodybuilding. She instructs other people. She inspires women. And she changed my life meeting her. So I think in this book, if you're going through a terrible time, you think to yourself, you know what? If they can get through that, I can get through this, whatever your this is. There's one other woman in the book I want to tell you about, and then we'll talk about Kathie Lee's drinking problem. I'm kidding. She doesn't have a very bad one, but anyway. Oh, this is taped. Okay. Anyway. Kath, I didn't mean that. Anyway, so there's a woman in the book, and her name is Roxanne Quimby. Okay. She comes from a family of brainiacs. Everyone went to Harvard and Ivy League schools, and she started to go to college, and then she didn't like it anymore. So she was kind of the black sheep of the family, and her parents were like, what is wrong with you? And she went off and married a guy and lived in the woods and wanted to live off the land and drink the water from the creek and make her own clothes and grow her own food. And she was like that. So her parents were like, woof, this is, you know, they almost disowned her. So her husband ended up leaving her. She had 2 children and no way to make money. So she got fired from 2 waitressing jobs, and she was at the end of her rope. You know when you don't know what you're going to do? This just shows you that life can change when you meet a stranger. So she's driving down the road in some crummy car, and she sees a guy sitting on the roadside in a lawn chair. He has like a Ted Kaczynski beard. He looks kind of crazy, really. And he had a big pickle jar full of honey sitting on a table, and she pulls over and she goes, what are you doing? He says, I'm selling honey. And she says, who's buying honey like that? It's in a pickle jar and it looks unappetizing. He said, look, I don't care. I live in that little house. It's paid for. I just do this for fun. She said, can I ask a favor? She said, if I can help you package it, will you give me a cut of it because I really need a job? He said, well, have at it. So she starts making little jars and honey, and people start pulling over and buying it. She says, well, what do you do with the wax? He says, oh, I put some in that shed. She said, can I make some candles? He said, have at it. She goes to a store and she watches how people buy candles. They pick up the candle and look at the bottom. She didn't know why they did that, but she said, you know what? I'm going to make the bottom look as pretty as the top. So she made beautiful candles. People started buying them. Then it started happening more and more, and she was like, wow, we have something here. So maybe we can use this and make some chapstick or something. She starts doing all kinds of stuff. She said, we need a name for this thing. So he has all of his weird hives somewhere, and there's like barbed wire, and then there's a sign that he has written himself, and it says, Burt's Bees. She goes, Burt's Bees. Why don't we call it Burt's Bees?